asked me to read because it's how we command, but reading out of Mark 10, verse 35 through 45. And James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came up to him and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And he said to them, "What do you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your glory." Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" And they said to him, "We are able." And Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared." And when the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant at James and John. And Jesus called them to him and said to them, "You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great one exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever will be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many."
You guys can have a seat. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for reading. You sounded very feminine. How's everyone doing? Yeah. Who's sleepy? Anybody? Got a little bit of the sleepers in your eyes? In your eyeballs? A little sleepy? I am. I'll tell you that. I am. I went to bed late and woke up early, but that's because I'm irresponsible, and we can get into that later. But it's what procrastination will do to you. So glad you're here. Glad to be here with you. So we're going to talk this morning about continuing a series that we've been doing called Lives That Reflect. And the indication is that we're talking about what does it look like if our lives reflect that of Christ, and we're talking about some certain attributes, characteristics, reading some passages together. It's been really, really cool. We talked about empathy so far. We've talked about forgiveness. And today, I'm not going to give it away yet what we're going to talk about. Anyways, I'll tell you a little bit about myself because that's normal. Can I get turned down just a little? I feel like oh, that's so great. Thank you. Okay, cool. Can everyone still hear me? Okay, cool. I just heard a lot of me, which normally I love, but almost too much. Almost. Okay, so a few things about me. Number one, I drank a full cup of coffee this morning, which doesn't sound like a lot to a lot of you, but for me, that's just a whole lot. So I feel like I could just, hang from the ceiling and give the message today. But I'm not. So if you're wondering, is that guy taking something? In a way, yes, but it's caffeine, so don't worry. So if I'm extra, that's why. That's what I feel like doing the whole time for 10 minutes, and I think it'd be better. So that's number one. Number two, I am a grad student. If you don't know, if you've heard me talk before, I think I say that every time. So I know how busy I am all the time. I'm so busy, I'm a grad student. But I know there's a million people busier than I am. I work for Engineering Career Services part-time. They pay for my schooling. And engineers in the room. Raise your hand. That's right. If you're an alumni and you've got a job, congratulations. If you're in school still and you haven't registered, it's time. Great, I saw you this week. What up? Great, shout out. All right, he did his job. That's what happens when you do your job. You get a shout out up front. All right? Put in a good word for you with the Lord. All right. Some other things. Well, okay. One hard thing to be a career counselor in Engineering Career Services is we have this rule of thumb called the sophomore rule. Okay. The sophomore rule is beginning when you're a sophomore, you begin to take off high school experience from your resume because it doesn't matter anymore. And sophomores just hate hearing that, okay? Because if you're an Ohio State student, you know that probably back in your high school, you were probably pretty good at what you did, right? Most of you were probably top 10 maybe, because it's Ohio State, it's a competitive school, right? And so everybody's high school stuff looks so sweet, but it's a really hard time when a student comes in and 90% of their resume is all the awesome things they did in high school, and I have to be hate to break it to you, but nobody cares anymore. And they're but did you see there were 850 people in my class and I was first. I just want to make sure that you saw it, because I think if I were an employer, I would shh. Nobody cares. So it's hard. It's hard to do that sometimes, but personally, I understand. So like many of you, in high school, I was just really smart. I really was. And I know some of you are like, that can't be true. But seriously, I was. Okay, there's this thing called the, I told many of you this before, but there's this thing in my high school, Dawson Bryant alma mater, called the Calculus Wall of Fame. How about that? And I am currently still located in the #1 position, based on my P scores. What up? What up? Now, could I take a simple integral now? No, I don't even remember. I think it was the chain rule. Still no. Still, I've got nothing. No. But I thought I'd tell you a little story just so you would know really like how bad of just a jerk I was in high school when it came to my accomplishments and how much I found my value in things that didn't matter after I was a sophomore in college. There's a little thing in tradition in schools called a valedictorian. I would ask you to raise your hand if you're a valedictorian, but nobody cares anymore, so... Oh, somebody did it anyways. That's cute. So, listen, when I was in high school, there was a competition. Beginning my freshman year, I mean, let's not joke around beginning my first grade, but especially beginning my freshman year about who was going to be #1 when it came time to graduate. Our high school gave out a lot of scholarships to the person who was just in the first position, let alone the fact that you got to tell everyone I was a valedictorian. I was in the running for this position, and I planned out my academic curriculum based on the weight of classes. So if it was an AP, in many of your classes, it was weighted on a 5.0 scale. Many of you in this room graduated with like a 4.7923, which is really impossible now when you think about it, but they did it in high school. So I took like every AP class I could. Didn't matter if I cared about it or not. I hated statistics. I needed no statistics ever in my life. Did I take it? Heck yes, because it was a 5.0 scale. I like jazz band. Did I take it? No, because it was a 4.0 scale, and it would bring my grade down even if I got an A, right? Some of you are like, that's so stupid. And other of you are like, I know exactly what game you're talking about, and I played it hard. I played that game hard, right? So I would take like really dumb classes that were actually only weighted half credits, because a half credit 4.0 would bring down my GPA less than a full credit 4.0. I played the game. Meanwhile, I brought my yearbook, but luckily I just took pictures and put them up. I had some competition. There were 3 of us, in fact. The first one, if you wouldn't mind, this is Adam Act. I don't know if it's against privacy rules to share people's names and pictures, but I'm going to. Exhibit A, Adam Act, my #1 competition. For the first 4 years of high school, he was pictured as #1. Actually, there were 2 people tied for #1, and I was listed as #3, which was bull because I had the second highest GPA in the school. But there were just 2 people with higher GPAs than me, so I guess it's fair. Competition #2, Exhibit B, the universe. We got her? Sam Zorn's on the left. Again, pretty sure this is against privacy rules to share her name and picture. But she's on Facebook. You can figure this out herself. Sam Zorn's, #2. Both of them pretty much perfectionists. Really a difficult time. Every single exam we ever took, we always ended up saying like, so that test was pretty tough, huh? Did you figure out that the last one was 4x squared minus 2x? Did you figure that out? Did I figure that out? Maybe try to figure out each other's grades. We'd have I knew their GPAs. I knew both of their GPAs at any time in high school. You could ask me and I would tell you how many .001s away they were from me. If you think, wow, that's sad and pathetic, I know, all right? But I was 18, all right? We're all sad and pathetic when we're 18, really. So it's fine. And then the last competition, that's right, Caleb Andrew Kraft. That's me. It was a slip-on tux, in case you're wondering. I couldn't afford that. I'm from Southern Ohio. So, anyways, we had this competition, and at the very end, I had thought about all the classes I took, and I knew that Sam Zorns had a B in one of her classes, and I knew that Adam App got a B in bowling. That's right. Took a PUD class so that he would lower his GPA down, but got a B in it because he wouldn't go to class. So I talked to my chemistry teacher and I said, listen, I'm still listed as #3, but I've only had an A-, and I know both of them have had Bs. Something doesn't add up here. And she said, I think you're right. And so she checked their transcripts and said, I think there's been a mistake. This was like a month before graduation. Still listed as #3. So I went down to talk to the guidance counselor, Mr. Malky, and I said, that's his real last name, people, don't laugh, that's not funny. So I said, Mr. Malky, and I explained the problem to him, and he said, I think you're right, there's been a mistake. In fact, that AP statistics class that I hated so much was weighted on a 4.0 scale on accident. So it actually affected like everybody's standings. But they changed it, and he says, well, congratulations, you're first in the class. And so I was so excited, I went upstairs and I sat down quietly in my calculus class, and then they made an announcement. Would Sam Zorns and I please report to Mr. Mulkey's class? And they walked downstairs and they came up crying. Yeah. And I'm not going to lie to you that I was ecstatic. I was so excited in my mind, but I just pretended like I didn't know anything that was happening. It's a terrible person. That's the only point of that story, okay? So I just wanted you to know what high school was like for me, okay? Great. Everybody feel like they have a good understanding of who I was, what kind of person I was, what that guy was in the back. Oh, take him down, take him down. Yeah. And if it makes anybody feel better, they're both really successful right now in life. So it's all right. It's fine. We're fine. All right, so let's talk about Jesus, okay? Let's do that. All right, so we read a passage in Mark 10. All right, so we're gonna, if you want to open up your Bibles to Mark 10, we're gonna kind of go through that a little bit at a time. Great, I'm gonna start reading for us, okay? We're gonna break this down a few bit of verses at a time. And you guys know that I obviously was behind this week, so I didn't get the notes on the back of the bulletin, which is so unlike me. But I'll tell you what the main points are going to be, and you can kind of space them out 1, 2, 3 if you want to right now. Okay. So this is going to be the lineup of the sermon today. Number one is we're going to be talking about power. Okay. So there's 4 points that helps you space them out. The first point is going to be the pursuit of power. The second point is going to be the problem of power. The third point is going to be a new paradigm for power. And the fourth and favorite point is the power of the gospel. So you've got the problem, the pursuit of power, the problem of power, a new paradigm for power, a lot of P's, and then the power of the gospel. I was raised Southern Baptist, so alliteration is very important. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Okay, great. So let's look at this first section here. It says, and James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came up to him, Jesus, and said to him, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. And he said to them, What do you want me to do for you? And they said to him, Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory. Okay, so the disciples are walking around. James and John kind of run up to the side of them and they say, Hey, will you just do whatever we ask you to do? You know, will you just, if anybody ever asks a friend like, can I have a favor? And you have to say yes no matter what it is, right? And you're like, you never say yes to that ever, right? You're always like, it depends. That's kind of what they're doing. And they said, this is the favor that they asked. So it seems kind of absurd to me, and it probably seems absurd to you, like, wow, those guys are really, really kind of, I don't know, either jerks or kind of dumb, you know, like that's not really an appropriate way to approach someone. I didn't like go down to the guidance counselor and say, Mr. Mulkey, I want you to do whatever I ask, you know. So that's not how it works. But if we remember, Jesus did teach. I'm just going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Jesus taught all the time, if you want something, ask for it, right? Seek and you shall find, ask and it will be given to you. If 2 or more of you are gathered together, There's 2 right there, okay? So, I mean, maybe they're just thinking, hey, he said it, so why not? And then the other thing is, to put this kind of in context, is that, and I'm going to have you throw the verse from Matthew 19 up. Matthew 19 gives a similar story, and right before this story is the parable of, or not the parable, but the story of the rich young ruler. And when Jesus is kind of explaining how things are going to be at the end, he gives them this little jolt right here, and this happens right before this story in Matthew that we're reading. He says, Truly I say to you, in the new world, when the Son of Man, which is how he referred to himself, when the Son of Man will sit on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So in context, he did also just tell them, it's probably like the same day. You can take that down. So just to make it like a little bit, like give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, is that they're asking, he told them, hey, 12 spots, and you're going to be sitting. And so they're just saying, can we get the left and the right? You know what I'm saying? Like, can I get the window seat? What up? That's kind of what they're asking for, okay? And then it should also be understood that this isn't as much like a thing of, hey, I love you, Jesus, and I want to sit as close to you as possible. I always used to argue about who got to sit on mom's side of the table when we ate dinner, because I just love my mom and I wanted to sit by her. But it's not this kind of thing. This is the right and the left hand are considered positions of authority, power, right? So effectively they're saying, hey, when you come in and start your new kingdom, can I be like your vice president? And he's going to be like the Secretary of State. Is that okay? Can we do that? That's kind of the question that they're asking. Okay, so it's not as much of a geographical positioning, but it's more of a power positioning. Okay? So they represent positions of power because they believe that Jesus was the Messiah, and we believe, understood that to mean that he was bringing in this new kingdom. They probably thought he was going to like overthrow Rome, who was in an oppressive relationship with Israel at the time. They probably thought he was going to overthrow Rome and start a new kingdom, and so he's on his way to do that as a Messiah, and they're saying, when you start that new kingdom, can we be like, you know what I mean, like up there? So that's what they're kind of asking. Okay, so what this relates to us is, and this is kind of under that first point of the pursuit of power, is that I'm going to argue that we all seek power, right? We all seek power. And a definition of power that I looked up is possession of control, authority, or influence over others or over circumstances. The possession of control, authority, or influence over others or over the circumstances. And I think a good way to think about power, and by the way, in my program, we talk a lot about power, privilege, and oppression in my grad school program. And some of you guys are in soft sciences, where you probably talk about that all the time in your classes. Some of you, not at all. But yeah, I see you. So that's a conversation that happens a lot. But basically, a good way to think about power is like currency. Power is this, let's just call it this invisible currency. I was hoping to get some Monopoly money this morning, but I didn't have any. Anybody have any Monopoly money on them? No, that's not normal, is it? Okay, fine. Just checking, you never know. Lord knows I don't have real money on me, so I had to go with the fake. So we'll think about power as like currency, this pot of currency that you can use, all right? And you can use it to either gain what you want, you can use it to keep what you have, you can use it to keep away what you don't want. Right? And so this is kind of how power works within individuals and within groups, okay? So I'll give you a personal example. If you are in Bible study with me and have been for a few years, especially, or if you have roomed with me, or just if you've had more than one or two conversations with me, you might know that I really like getting what I want. I just love it, all right? It's hard to admit that, but it's true. And it's not always I don't always think I'm being super selfish, but when I get in my head an idea of how, it would be cool if we did this, or the best way to hang out in our group, this would be the best way to hang out, right here. When I get that in my head, or do you know where we should go for dinner? This is where we should go for dinner. You know what I'm talking about. Man, I just really want to get what I want. I was having a conversation with Ed recently after a staff meeting, and we walked out and I said, you know what I'm realizing about myself for the first time in 24 years is that, man, I just think my idea is always better. I just think whatever the idea in my head is just always better than whatever idea anyone else on the planet has. It's like, if we did things the way that I kind of think they should be done, the world would just be a better place. All in all. I'm realizing, holy cow, I actually think, I'm dead serious, I actually think that. So coming to this realization that I love to get what I want, and I love for things to be the way that I want them to be. And normally I think it's what's best for everybody, but a lot of times, probably most of the time, my own self-interest is weaved in there as well. So when we think about power, I think it's easy to think, that's about governments, and I'm not in a position of power, I don't even see myself as a leader, maybe. So this doesn't apply to me. But if we think about power like the word control, maybe it does apply to you, doesn't it? Yeah, some of you are stinging already. Just wait till I give the examples. All right, get ready. I'm about to cast some nets and you're going to get caught. It's fine. So how about just when things don't go your way, like I said, okay, and you get a little frustrated, right? That's like power. That's power hungry, right? You want power of the situation. And even if they don't go your way, what if they just don't go like they were supposed to go? Or they just don't go like they were planned. Oh, and you're frustrated? Power! You want it, okay? You may not agree, but it's just the way it is, all right? How about when somebody or something, this really gets me, okay? Somebody or something just interrupts your day. Changes your schedule. What you knew you woke up and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to class, I'm going to go to work, I've got 3 hours of homework, I'm going to get that done, then I'm going to go home and I'm going to use Jake's rice cooker, and I'm going to put the brown rice in, and it's going to be delicious, and then I'm going to go to bed. And you know that when you wake up, and then halfway through the day, everything falls apart. Work needs you in an extra hour, the assignment gets moved back, your group needs to meet, and they don't have another time to do except for this afternoon, and someone left dirty rice in the rice cooker, and you can't get to clean it because there's a pile of dishes in the sink that you have to get through before you can even cook rice. This is a made-up example. Or how about when somebody threatens what you feel is your right? Or this is my right, this is my space, I own this, and you came in. You came into my space, you took my stuff, you did whatever I said not to do. You drank my milk. You drank my milk. And you are upset, right? Because you want to maintain what belongs to you. You want to get what doesn't, and you want to keep away what you don't want. And power is the currency with which you can use to make that happen. All right, so hopefully now you'll all understand that you're power-hungry, selfish people. Okay, that's point number one. So if you're not there, just, I don't know, let it soak in some more. It'll be fine. So I know I am. All right, so let's talk a little bit now about the problem with power. Let's move on to Matthew 10, 38 through 41, if you don't mind, sir. Thank you. All right, Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with a baptism with which I am baptized?" And they said to him, "We're able." And Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink, you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or my left, that's not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared." And when the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant at James and John. Okay, so I'm going to kind of side note some of these verses and talk about them briefly, but we're going to mainly focus on the last verse in this passage. But just a side story, suffering happens. Okay, that's the cup he's talking about, right? When Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane right before his crucifixion, do you remember he prayed that if God could, if he would be willing, that he would pass the cup from him? Okay, so when he's talking about cup, we're probably talking about that kind of suffering, that sacrificial suffering. And the baptism is that of suffering, of laying down your life, of maybe even martyrdom in this specific case, because we know for a fact that James was martyred and John was exiled, and there's belief that he was even attempted to be maybe boiled alive, I think. Something I read, some say that. So it just depends on which early historian you follow. But no doubt both of them were persecuted and one definitely martyred for their faith. So he is telling them, this is the cup that they're talking about. I don't know what they think he means when he's like, are you able to drink the cup and, receive the baptism? I think they're probably thinking like, there's a war coming, there's a storm brewing, are you man enough? That kind of thing. And they're like, yeah, we'll drink it. But he's really saying like, hey, I'm going to die. In fact, he just told them that, so they just, all the time. It's like, I'm going to die, and if you're going to follow me, you're going to lose your life too. And I will say this, that even though at the way things stand right now, you don't probably hold a great chance of being martyred for your faith, although it definitely happens today. But you will have to lay down your life to follow Christ. Like, you will have to lose it. Just lose it, okay? So know that up front. I'll say that, okay? And it's interesting that power, how I think this can relate to power is that, one of the ways that we use power, we use this currency of power is to keep away what we don't want. But Jesus is here saying, like, hey, if you want to follow me, if you want to have a place in this kingdom, then you're going to have to drink the same cup I drink and receive the same baptism I'm baptized with. So, but we all lose our life. That's not just that persecuted part of the world story, although it is very different. Okay, but I want to look at this last verse right here where it says that the 10 heard it, right, and they just got ticked off at James and John. So that makes sense, right, because it's kind of a jerk move to go and ask for a position of power in the new kingdom. But why the disciples got angry is because basically, if James and John get the left and the right seat, then the other 10 definitely don't, right? So that's the thing. I mean, they're asking, I think this is why the disciples get angry. They might say like, dude, that's a selfish move, but in their heart, it's probably selfish motivations that's causing that anger as well. Because if they get it, that means I don't. The question of, hey, can I have your right-hand seat is the same question as, hey, can you make sure the 11 others don't get the right-hand seat? So the question of me saying, hey, can I be the valedictorian, right, is the same thing as saying, hey, can Adam and Sam not be, and I'm going to celebrate when they're not. Okay, so it's very similar, and that's the problem, I think, with power, is we think of this currency model, right, that you have this currency to work with in which you can maintain and keep away what you want, don't want. we gather that currency, but we usually gather it from other people to keep it for ourselves, right? So one thing, if you study power, if you learn about power, it's very common in human history that where power and privilege exist, somewhere in the world oppression is going to happen as a result. They work on kind of a teeter-totter scale, right? So it's hard to gain power without taking it away from someone else. And some people disagree that that's always the case, but in the way that human history has played itself out, that's typical. And the thing about power is that it's not so much, like if we think about power as influence, for example, it's not a bad thing to have influence. Jesus had a lot of influence, the disciples had a lot of influence, the Apostle Paul had an incredible amount of influence. But the thing about power is that when we get a hold of it as human beings, more times than not, we just really do terrible things with it. It's more like not as much itself as an entity is a bad thing, but it's when, as broken people, we use it as a tool to do broken things and to cause broken places. Abraham Lincoln has a quote, which I'm going to have you throw up there, Sam. He says, "Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power." It's an interesting thing we always talk about. It's tough to make it through struggling times, and trust me, actually, most of you know this already, it is. Adversity and hard times and suffering, things happening, they're difficult. But what Abraham Lincoln said, which I do really like this quote, is he says, almost everybody can handle adversity, right? You just get through it. You just keep living and you learn how to deal. Almost everybody can handle adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power and see what he does with that. So I've heard before, many men can handle failure, few can handle success. Similar kind of idea, but when you get a hold of that power, really, it's a great way for human nature to really go on the spotlight, right? So some big examples of what happens with this kind of take, and then when I have all this power, what am I going to do? Right? So we see a lot of oppression in the world today. I think about oppressive regimes that exist now and have existed before. These are examples of misuse and abuse of power. Genocide goes along with that. We've done some work in this church. We've done some work with advocacy for human trafficking and sex slavery. That's definitely an abuse of power, abuse and misuse of power. We have a history in this country of slavery, segregation, racism, and today, still racism within the structures of how society operates. That's misuse and abuse of power. The extreme difference in between wealth and poverty of different nations. I'm not going to get all political, but maybe a little. But I'll be safe, I promise, don't worry. But that's a misuse and abuse of power, right? So, as an example, the United States spends more on the military defense budget than the next 13 countries combined spend. We give 1% of our budget away to foreign aid. And some argue that that's for political reasons most of the time. I don't know about that. I'm not saying that the government's supposed to be our answer, but I'm just saying it's natural that when you get currency, when you get that currency of power, it's much more easier to use it to maintain the power that you already have, to keep away the things that you don't want, than it is to give it away, to help other people. So it exists. It exists, and we are swimming in it. These systems of abuse, right, of power. Okay, bad news, I apologize. Okay, small example of what this looks like too. Okay, I'll give you a personal one because the structures, they exist, but so how many of you guys know Joseph? He sells the street speech paper around Starbucks, and he would tell you up front that his best friend and most faithful person to him in the world is Chris McConaughey. So yesterday I had the privilege of taking Joseph home from the wedding. To his home on the lower west side, I think. Yeah. And so I was driving him home, and I was thinking about it, and we're having a conversation. I was thinking, man, I should be more a part of Joseph's life, like Chris did. Chris would get him groceries, all kinds of stuff. And I was thinking, I should help out with this too. It'd be cool. He's a great guy. If you don't know Joseph, he's a really, really generous, giving human being. I was taking him home, and I pulled into his parking lot. And, there's apartment buildings and things. And I was like, oh, Joseph, I said, these are nice buildings, man. He was like, oh, no, Brother Caleb, it's the ghetto. I was like, oh, okay. He's like, yeah, gunshots going off every night. Police sirens are always, it seems like, it's just a really dangerous place to be, all the time, Mr. Caleb. It's really, really dangerous. I was like, All right, see you. Goodbye. See you later. Is this your stop? Your door's down there. It's okay. You can walk. It's fine. It's fine. See you. Bye. You know, like that's how I feel. Immediately, I'm like, I'm in a dangerous place and I need to protect my safety, right? And so my original, I drive into this place thinking like, oh, I'm Mr. Awesome. I'm driving this, person who needs a ride home. And I think like, I'll be a more part of his life. And then as soon as that helping starts to take a little bit from me, right? Threaten my safety a little bit, right? And infringe upon the protections and the privileges that I have. Even just a little bit, even so much that I recognize I'm in a dangerous zone. I'm like, I can't help you anymore. Like I no longer have a desire to go to your apartment and buy you groceries, especially after dusk, So we just can't do that. And so I can see these workings out in me too, where there is such a thing as power. I have it, right? I have this protection of safety around me that I don't have to worry about those things. And when it's threatened, I want to call. Okay, so we looked at the pursuit and the problem. Let's turn around now and have a good time and look at a new paradigm that Jesus gives us for power. Okay, we're going to continue with 42 through 44. This is what he says. And Jesus called them. I love this, by the way. This is something I'm trying to learn how to do in my life. But Jesus always knows opportune teaching moments, right? He always says, he sees them arguing and he's not like, oh, these dweebs, I'll never get it. My gosh, leave me alone for 1 second. But he sees this arguing not, or even like, man, this is a bad thing. Someone's got to stop this. But he just knows immediately, now's the time. Now's the time to teach them this awesome lesson that I need them to learn. He just knows. I wish I were better at that, understanding when there's times to help someone see something based on what's happening right there, using the present as a metaphor for a beautiful teaching. He always knows that. But anyways, so he pulls them to the side for this teachable moment, and he says the following: you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. They're always telling them what to do, basically, just taking your position of power and using it to command other people. But it shall not be so among you. I love that. But it shall not be so among you. And this means the followers of Jesus, right? So you could hear Jesus saying this to you right now. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be the slave of all. Okay, I want to break down a couple of these words really quickly. When he says, whoever would be great among you must be your servant. Servant, that word in the Greek is, I'm probably not going to say it right, but that's okay, diakonos. Sounds good, right? Everybody's thinking, yeah, it sounds great. Diakonos. Anybody know a word that common in church leadership that we get from that word? Deacon. Yeah, that's a good job. Good job, everybody. Good job. Diakonos. That's where we get the word deacon, and what it means is a servant, basically. It has the connotation of running around serving tables, right? Kind of just making sure you're the one who meets everyone's needs, right? If you've been in the customer service industry, it's kind of like that. Kind of like, oh, it doesn't matter what I want to think. It's all about you, yay! It's like that, okay? It's your servant. Whoever wants to be the greatest among you must be the diakonos, must be this table waiter. And whoever wants to be first among you must be the slave of all. And that word is doulos. A lot of times, a real popular tattoo among the hipster Christians out there is to have doulos Christos, or Christos doulos, I don't know which side, but it's the bondservant of Christ, right? That's what it means. That word means bondservant. It's the idea of, a little different than I think how we might think historically of slavery, but it's basically that you have a great debt owed to someone. And so, you work for them, you belong to them to pay that off. So whoever would be first among you must become as if they're indebted. When we used to watch cartoons, it's a common plot that when someone saves your life, it's like, oh, I belong to you now, right? Like Jar Jar Binks, even though I really can't stand that character in Star Wars, if you're familiar. It's kind of like that, right? So it's like, hey, you saved my life, and now some of you are really nerds out there. And wow, you lost it just because I said Jar Jar Binks. That's crazy. It's like that idea that now you saved my life, now my life belongs to you. That's the bondservant. So these are kind of the words that they use, all right? So I was thinking about how to paint a picture of what this kind of life would look like inside a community like our own. Of someone who would lay down their life to serve someone, put their needs above, to become the table waiter for us, right? To become a bondservant. And luckily, I have a picture that was just recently taken that brought this to mind. If you could put the picture that I have from last night. Go ahead, do your alls. Yeah. Mr. and Mrs. Chris McConaughey. This is a picture of them at their wedding last night. And this would be an awesome picture if some tool weren't yawning in the background. So thanks to your wife for posting that all over the internet. But nonetheless, you can ignore the tool, all right? And we'll just talk about these two. Is that something that came out a lot and within the wedding, within the toast, within the speeches, within any conversation you've been in, and if you know either of these two people, then you know this already, that these two are just servants to our body, right? Absolutely. I'm lucky to talk about it because they're not here, so I can just brag about them all day. But you know, I've known Tara since I was a freshman. Chris is my roommate and my best friend. And I've witnessed these people, and you've witnessed these people constantly put their needs second to ours, right? Chris is one of the busiest people I know, especially our age. You know, he works, he helps with insurance policy and advising people, but basically that means that sometimes he gets chewed out all day, which some of you are familiar with that too. But he, you know, sit there and he'll listen to people on the phone and say I need my money, I need my 401k out. And be I'm sorry, but there's a 60-day limit, there's nothing I can do. And they're I'm going to be dead in 60 days. And he's I'm so sorry, there's nothing I can do, you know. So he goes through that, he gets out of work. Normally, by the way, he may have woke up early to do something for New Life, usually plan out what worship is going to be, type in the prayer cards for this week. Then he'll get out of work and he'll go hang out with one of you, probably one of you dudes out there, right? Maybe go over to a Bible study with you or something, right? Plan for this, plan for that. Then usually goes to the office building till maybe 1 in the morning and gets chart boards ready for worship this week. He practices, I think, maybe more than anybody. No offense, I know a lot of you guys practice a lot, but he practices a lot. And he gets everything ready for everybody, and he comes home sometimes at 1:32, wakes me up when he comes into the room, goes to sleep so he can wake up and do it the next day. So I don't want you to think that, I don't want you to get some romanticized picture of what it looks like to be a servant. Sometimes it just is really, really difficult. I've seen it with this guy. And you girls can say the same thing about Tara all day, right? I know she just gives and gives and gives at her job, which does very little giving back to her, if any, right? And then she comes and gives and gives and gives to our